Have you ever met someone so shockingly rude, you're left wondering, did they seriously just say that out loud? When arrogance walks in before they do, and disrespect masquerades as casual conversation. But more dangerous than rudeness itself is the silence we offer it, because silence, if rooted in fear, becomes quiet permission. Some people enter a room, and before they even speak, their ego announces itself. Then they interrupt your sentence, throw passive-aggressive remarks like it's small talk, and carry themselves with the smug belief that the world somehow owes them an apology. And worse, they expect you to smile, nod, and absorb it, as if your boundaries don't matter at all. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Disrespect only survives where it's allowed. And most of us, we've been conditioned to stay quiet, to keep the peace, to turn the other cheek, while little by little, our dignity gets chipped away. But what if I told you that silence born from fear isn't strength, it's surrender? In this video, we're going to unravel the false idea that staying calm means staying passive. Instead, we'll explore how true power shows up when disrespect comes knocking. There's a kind of silence that echoes louder than any scream. It's the moment you decide to stop proving your worth to people who were never qualified to question it in the first place. Have you ever been there? Someone speaks down to you with that smug air of superiority, like they've forgotten that respect is supposed to be mutual. You sit there thinking, did they really just say that? It stings for a second, sure, but then something inside you shifts. You realize I don't have to match their energy. I don't need to snap back. I can choose strength over spectacle, and in that moment, you reclaim your power, not by being louder, but by standing firm in calm dignity. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." That quote lives in my bones, because when you meet disrespect with dignity, you don't just protect your peace, you starve their ego. Rude people thrive on chaos. They feed on emotional reactions, on the satisfaction of knowing they got to you. So when you deny them that, that's the real sting. That's real power. Stoic philosophy reminds us of something we tend to forget in heated moments. The only thing truly under our control is our reaction. Not their words, not their tone, but our choice in how we meet the moment. When you say, "I don't lower myself to your level," you're not being passive, you're being precise. You're drawing a boundary, firm, clear, and without crossing into theirs. And that's just the beginning. In the next part, we'll go deeper into how calmness doesn't just protect your peace, it redefines your presence. It took me a while to realize this. Those people who triggered me the most weren't just being offensive. They were shining a spotlight on something inside me that hadn't fully healed. And once I stopped reacting to them, I could finally see it clearly. It wasn't an attack. It was an invitation to grow. You see, not every jab deserves a comeback. Not every comment requires your energy. Some things, they're just noise, background static testing the strength of your inner volume. And if your inner peace is turned up loud enough, that noise fades into nothing. That's the real power play. Not in how sharp your tongue can be, but in how unshakable your presence is. Let them throw shade. Let them try to bait you. Let them shout into their own storm while you walk away untouched, like stepping out of the rain completely dry. Funny how some words stick with us. Not because they're true, but because they brush against something raw, something unresolved inside us. You ever notice that? You can physically leave a moment, but mentally still carry it like an old souvenir you never asked for. That's how disrespect lingers, like an unwanted guest who overstays their welcome. Someone says something cruel in passing, and suddenly you're wide awake at 2 a.m., replaying the moment, rewriting how you should have responded. We've all been there. But here's what no one tells you. You don't have to let their words live rent-free in your mind. You're not a storage unit for other people's projections. The Stoics understood this long before psychology caught up. Seneca once said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." And doesn't that quote hit differently when you're mentally reliving a cutting remark over and over again? Because the real damage doesn't come from what they said. It comes from what you allowed it to become in your mind. The internal echo, the distorted belief that maybe, just maybe, they were right. But that's the deception of disrespect. It wears the costume of truth and hopes you're too hurt to question it. Carl Jung once noted, "What you resist persists." But over time, I learned something deeper. It's not just about resisting thoughts. It's about recognizing them, then choosing not to give them power. You can say to yourself, "I hear it. I see what you're trying to do." But no, you don't get to stay. That's not denial. That's emotional hygiene. That's protecting your mental space like it's sacred, because it is. Not every insult is a blueprint for who you are. Not every opinion is worth absorbing. The people who throw the harshest words, they often carry the heaviest unresolved pain. They lash out not because they understand you, but because they've never learned to understand themselves. They want to hurt you to feel powerful. But when you don't give them that satisfaction, when you walk away clear, clean, and unapologetic, they realize the truth. They never had power to begin with. Disrespect grows only when you feed it, when you replay the moment, analyze their tone, draft imaginary comebacks in your mind. That's how it multiplies. But when you choose to say, "This doesn't belong in me," you break the loop. You remove the oxygen. You protect your peace. So the next time someone throws a careless insult or aims a low blow, pause. Ask yourself, do I really want to carry this? Do I want to hear this every time I close my eyes? And if the answer is no, release it. Say it aloud if you need to. I won't let your words live in my mind. That's not weakness. That's freedom. And it's not just about silencing your critics. It's about silencing the overthinking, the second guessing, the habit of trying to make sense of nonsense. It's wild how people reveal their truth without even realizing it. You think they're attacking you, judging you, tearing you down. But if you listen closely, what you'll really hear is a confession, wrapped in sarcasm, drenched in bravado, but a confession nonetheless. Because most people aren't speaking to you. They're speaking from themselves, from their fears, their shame, their emotional wounds they've never dared face. And when they feel small, they'll try to make you feel even smaller, just so they don't feel so alone in their misery. And that's exactly where Stoicism shines, especially in moments like these. Epictetus once said, "It's not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them." It's easy to take an insult at face value, to internalize it, to stew. But the Stoic steps back, sees beyond the surface, recognizes that insults say far more about the speaker than the listener, because most disrespect, It's just insecurity in disguise, fear dressed up as false confidence. I remember one moment like it was yesterday. I was in a heated debate, and the other person looked at me and said, "You're way too sensitive. You'll never survive out here." Years ago, that would have crushed me. I might have questioned myself, maybe even apologized for who I was. But not that day, because that day I saw it clearly. It wasn't about me. It was a mirror reflecting their fear. What they were really saying was, "I don't know how to feel deeply. I've numbed myself so much, I see empathy as weakness." So I just looked at them, calm and grounded, and said, "Thanks for revealing more about yourself." And in that moment, I saw it, that flicker in their eyes. I'll never forget that moment, the split second when I saw it in their eyes, that flicker of realization, the look that said they knew I had seen right through the mask. Because projection, as Carl Jung explained, is when people unconsciously transfer their own fears, desires, or insecurities onto others. They don't say, "I struggle with this." Instead, they accuse you of being too emotional, too driven, too naive, not because it's true, but because they haven't yet made peace with those very things inside themselves. They don't have the tools to explore their own emotional depth, so they lash out at yours. But once you recognize this dynamic, something profound happens. The sting fades. You stop feeling attacked and start feeling informed. Their words lose their edge, not because you've become cold, but because you finally understand. They weren't revealing anything about you. They were accidentally exposing everything about themselves. And that insight, that's liberation. Because when you stop reacting emotionally and instead respond with calm, grounded observation, it's like holding up a mirror they never intended to face. Imagine this. Someone throws unprovoked shade, trying to throw you off balance. But instead of rising to it, you respond with stillness. You simply say, "Sounds like you've revealed more about yourself than me." Just like that, the entire game collapses. You take control of the narrative, not by overpowering them, but by removing yourself from their chaos. You flip the script, and without raising your voice or proving your point, you remind everyone. Sometimes the most powerful move is to not play at all. Some conversations aren't conversations. They're traps dressed up as dialogue. At first, you think it's just a disagreement, maybe even a healthy one, but then come the interruptions, the smug smiles, the passive jabs masked as just joking, and suddenly it clicks. They're not looking for understanding. They're looking for a fight, or worse, a co-star in their drama. And that's when you know, this isn't a discussion, it's a storm. And you've long outgrown the need to dance in the rain to prove you're unaffected. There's a quiet maturity in knowing when to stop speaking, when to step back, when to recognize that protecting your peace doesn't require a mic drop or a dramatic exit. Sometimes all it takes is one line, said with full clarity and calm. "I've outgrown this conversation." And when you say it, you feel it. A weight lifts, the tension dissolves, the emotional tug of war, one you never signed up for, finally ends. The thing that used to keep you awake at night, now you can walk away from it without hesitation. The Stoics had a name for this inner discipline, ataraxia, a clear, tranquil state of being, unshaken by outside disturbance. Epictetus said it best. If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize your mind is complicit in the provocation. That hits deep, doesn't it? Because most of the chaos we experience It's optional. You don't have to engage just because someone invites you into a fight. You don't owe a response to people who've already decided they're not willing to hear you anyway. What you do need is the courage to choose peace over noise, clarity over chaos. Carl Jung once said, "What you resist persists, but what you look at and face disappears." That group chat, it didn't stop being toxic because you left it. It stopped mattering. And that's the difference. Growth doesn't argue. It doesn't demand the last word. It simply walks away, quietly, cleanly, not out of pride, but because it no longer fits the person you've worked so hard to become. Here's the truth most people never learn. You don't need to win every argument. You don't need to explain your silence. You don't need to turn critics into allies. Some people are committed to misunderstanding you, not because you're unclear, but because if they truly understood you, they'd have to confront the noise inside themselves. And that's not your burden to carry. So next time someone twists your words, tosses out a backhanded compliment, or presses a button that used to trigger you, pause, breathe. You don't owe a rebuttal. You don't owe your energy. Just say, with calm and conviction, "I've outgrown this conversation," and then leave, gracefully, quietly. Let them talk. Let them spiral. You've got better places to be, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. There's a strange kind of power in not reacting to the things that once shattered you. No raised voice, no racing heart, no flinching, not because you've grown numb, but because you've grown whole. You've met your pain, named it, sat with it, and walked through it. So now when someone tries to bait you with a version of yourself you've already buried, all they find is a closed door, sealed shut, reinforced with wisdom. And that kind of peace, it's unsettling for people who only know how to measure power through control. You want to know what real healing looks like? It looks like someone saying the exact same cruel thing they said years ago, and this time you feel nothing. Not numbness, not denial, just stillness. Because healing isn't about pretending you were never hurt. It's about knowing exactly where the wound once lived and realizing it's no longer open. It's about remembering without reliving, carrying the memory without carrying the pain. And that confuses people, especially the ones who once had the power to break you. I've had people throw my past at me like it was still a weapon, expecting it to cut. And maybe once it did. Maybe once their words would have left me spiraling. So when I say, that version of me doesn't live here anymore, I'm not bragging. I'm not being cold. I'm speaking from a place of calm. A quiet, unwavering confidence that only comes from doing the deep internal work. The kind that never shows up on social media, but changes everything. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And that's exactly what healing offers us. Control, not over others, not over the chaos of life, but over the inner space where peace lives. Because the world won't stop testing you, people won't stop throwing jabs. But when you've sat with your shadows, learned their names, and made peace with every corner of your past, no one can use your pain against you. That's why I say, you can't trigger what I've healed. And that's not a defense mechanism, it's a declaration. Carl Jung believed that healing requires confronting the shadow, the parts of ourselves we'd rather pretend don't exist. He said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And he was right. Real healing doesn't happen when you avoid the wound. It happens when you turn toward it, when you stop trying to erase the pain and let it shape you, not into something bitter, but into something unbreakable. People expect your reaction. They're prepared for the tears, the anger, the snapping back. But when you stay calm, that calm shakes them. Because calm says, I'm no longer that version of me, and you no longer have access. So next time someone tries to get under your skin, remember, your healing isn't for their understanding. It's not for their approval. It's for your peace. You didn't go through all that pain, all that rebuilding, just to fall apart again over the same noise. You didn't bleed for your growth just to flinch at the first sign of pressure. Your silence, your stillness, your restraint, that's not weakness. That's the evidence that what once wounded you has become a scar. And scars, they don't cry. They don't bleed. They whisper, I survived, and you no longer matter. There comes a moment in life when chaos stops exciting you, when being right is no longer as satisfying as being at peace, when you stop proving, not because you have nothing left to say, but because you finally understand the price of every unnecessary reaction. And the cost is just too high. Your energy is expensive. Your peace, priceless. And once you learn that, truly learn that, you begin treating it like the most valuable currency you own. I used to give everyone access. If someone wanted an argument, I gave them one. If they threw shade, I threw it right back. If they misunderstood me, I'd explain myself endlessly, desperately trying to clear the air. But each time I did that, I gave away something. A piece of my clarity, a piece of my calm, a piece of myself. Until one day I realized I was bleeding energy for people who didn't even deserve a drop. That's when it all changed. I stopped engaging with anything that pulled me out of alignment. I stopped letting every barking dog on the path distract me from the direction I was walking. Seneca said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And isn't that exactly what happens when you let the wrong people live rent-free in your mind? They don't just interrupt your day. They hijack your thoughts. They steal your focus. They warp your sense of peace. But here's the good news. Just like you let them in, you can show them the door. Peace isn't passive. It's a choice, a boundary, a line drawn clearly between you and the chaos. Carl Jung also said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But here's the catch. You can't become that version of yourself if you're constantly reacting to people who haven't even figured out who they are. Because not all voices come from clarity. Some come from projection, from confusion, from the deep frustration of lives they can't control. And if you're not careful, their noise becomes your reality. So now, I treat my peace like it's gold. No discounts, no explanations, no defending my silence to those who only listen to respond. Someone tries to drag me into conflict, I let the bait rot. Someone makes a snide remark, I smile like I didn't even hear it, and maybe I didn't. Because when you're tuned into peace, you don't pick up static, you filter it out. This isn't arrogance, it's discipline. It's choosing your inner world over external noise. Because peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the refusal to dance with it. Not every barking dog deserves your attention. Some just want to hear themselves bark. Let them. You're walking somewhere higher. Every time you don't react, you invest in yourself. Every time you choose stillness, you make room for clarity, purpose, and joy to rise. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. And in a world built to profit from your outrage, your calm is a revolution. There's something deeply unsettling about someone who doesn't flinch, who stays grounded when others explode, who doesn't defend their worth because it never needed defending. That's true power, not loud, not flashy, but rooted. And that's what the Stoics meant when they talked about strength, not in dominance, but in restraint. Because the strongest response isn't a comeback, it's not needing one. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." That quote isn't just theory, it's a blueprint. True strength is quiet, measured, intentional. The ability to pause when others explode, to stay silent when others shout, to speak only when your words carry weight, not just volume. Carl Jung echoed that same truth. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. And that's the real test of calm. When someone disrespects you, can you pause long enough to ask, what is this moment trying to teach me about me? Because every reaction is a reflection, and every non-reaction, that's a revelation. Handling disrespect isn't about passivity. It's about refusing to hand someone else the remote control to your emotions. It's not weakness to stay grounded. It's precision. So the next time someone throws shade, tosses a careless insult, tests your boundaries hoping you'll break, pause. Say it calmly, clearly, from the depth of your healing, I'm not the one. You can't trigger what I've healed. I've outgrown this conversation. Say it. Let it land. Then walk away with every piece of your power still intact. Because not every battle deserves your energy. Not every invitation needs your acceptance.